So we're going to begin the meeting. We don't have, oops, sorry, kind of loud. We don't have quorum, so we're not going to officially gavel in the meeting, but we are going to begin. We'll take up matters that do not require a vote, given that we do not have quorum. But at this point, I'd ask us to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. So I am Ventura Rodriguez. I'm not John Connolly, who is our chair. He can't be with us tonight, so he's asked me to chair the meeting in his stead. We will turn it over to public comments. Right now I have one person signed up, Mr. Mali signed up.
Mali, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. As we are ending this academic year, we are proud for the great accomplishment and success of our children. Our public school, with the impeccable leadership of Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris, now on the road to become the best public school in the nation. Her plan of 100 days just listening was important. Attendance workshop brought the parent, educator, and community together. Since Honorable Superintendent Paris' arrival to our city has been only positive changes. As a great genius, Horace Mann said, education indeed the most powerful equalizer in the society. Our city of immigrants now rising up with the best education for our children. Lawrence Teachers Union must know 80,000 citizens are behind them. During the crisis of the Columbia gas, Honorable Superintendent kept our public school open. Still, citizens such as my neighbor Anthony Wilson, homeless because of the Columbia gas grid. Maura Haley, Massachusetts Attorney General, has done nothing. He must resign immediately since she has done nothing against Columbia gas for our citizens who die. In this election year, we demand of you support our great teachers and their union. Please remember our wonderful custodial workers. They need good contract. We always thankful to their hard working. Thank you for great academic year. We're looking forward to start the most progressive academic year after summer vacation with the best summer wishes for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will now formally open the meeting at 6:10. And we move to the agenda under new business. We have review of attendance and family engagement policies.
Yeah, sure. First, I wanted to give a brief superintendent's report. This evening, I'm very pleased to do a summary, a recap of amazing things and highlights that are happening in our district. A couple weeks ago, we graduated over 700 high schoolers. It was an evening full of pride and joy, amazing excitement and energy. Last week, we had 34 teachers who received advanced and/or master's awards. This is an initiative that we have that allows and gives teachers additional leadership opportunities, and they work with their school leaders and their schools to advance student achievement. We also had 17 women graduate from our paraprofessional program. It was an amazing opportunity for community members, specifically parents, to enroll in a year-long program, and we celebrated their accomplishments. They are ready and skilled and trained to be able to interview for positions as paraprofessionals in our school district. Lastly, we also graduated from Adult Learning Center, many graduates. It was a wonderful celebration. And the last thing that I'll report is that today, school leaders and central office leaders participated in day one of 2 days of our Instructional Leadership Institute. We are taking on a multi-year goal of aligning social, emotional, and restorative justice practices to promote a coherent network of supports that ensure positive outcomes for all of our students. And the day was filled with learning, lots of thoughtful questions, and engagement from school leaders and central office leaders. Next, I want to invite Denise Snyder, Assistant Superintendent for Family Community Engagement, to lead us and facilitate the conversation about attendance and family engagement policies.
Good evening. We're going to start with the family engagement policies and then move into the attendance policies, if that's okay. So I'll give them a moment to pull it up. So we're here tonight to present to you a couple of family engagement policies, one new and one revised. And I think we can start with, hold on, always a learning curve. All right. Is there a trick to this that I'm missing this evening? Oh, all right. Okay. No problem. All right, so we can begin with the question of why do we need family and student engagement policy? And in short, it's many educators and many classrooms and many schools even work very hard to engage with our students and families. And some of these folks truly understand the fundamentals of high-quality family engagement. Others have misconceptions about what it looks like, and sometimes misconceptions about the value. Policy provides a framework outlining the goals and expectations for the district and for our schools, our families, and our students, as well as a commitment by the district to build capacity for this effort. We know that students achieve best when they and their families partner together. When there's partnership needs, when partnership needs to be authentic and in service of students' academic success, that schools need guidance and support to do this work well, and that the district needs to be in compliance with regulations that outline some of this work and meet, if not exceed, the state standards in this work. So, modeling the same need for partnership, tonight I'm presenting a new policy and a revised policy for your consideration. But these were developed by members of the Family Engagement Partnership Council, which include more than 20 collaborators from our stakeholder groups. Some of these individuals are in the room this evening, and if they would kindly stand for a moment, I'd like you to see some of the folks who participated in this journey. Please know that I am just a delivery mechanism. They did this work over the course of a year, and the whole team, you can sit if you want, guys, thank you very much, included 4 high school students, 3 parents, 3 educators, 4 school leaders, a community partner, and the staff of the Family, Community, and Student Engagement Office, really modeling or walking the talk, if you will. So as I mentioned, it is a collaborative process. We spent a year in monthly meetings to get to this point. In our initial meetings, we spent time learning. I think it's important to note that every participant in the Family Engagement Partnership Council is an expert in family engagement because of their own experience. But that doesn't necessarily mean, and they'd be the first ones to say, I don't know what high quality is, I just know what my experience is, right? So we did spend a few months talking about, what does the research say? What does policy say? What are some best practices? Also things like, what's the difference between policy and procedure? If we're going to recommend policy, we need to understand those differences. And then how do we write policy in a world where school autonomy exists, and how does policy coexist with that? And then we spent the rest of the meetings generating the major themes for our work, considering the recommendations of members of the group, but also of the wider community, discussing benefits and challenges of the recommendations, and eventually crafting, reviewing, and revising those recommendations. We also heard from over 150 additional parents, students, educators, school leaders, and community partners through our family engagement summits, which were held twice annually. And at the last one, we shared the overarching themes and talked about what would be the assets and benefits, what would be the wonderings or challenges that might be involved in policy, and they were able to lend their voices to the policy writing through that means. And they were also invited to join the work group on this work, so they were able to continue their voice through several more meetings. So let's talk about what's being proposed. There's a brand new family engagement policy. We have a lot of good policies. We don't have one specifically acting as an umbrella over all things related to family engagement. The themes that are included in that policy are communication, family partnerships, student voice, shared decision-making, fostering roles families can play that support student success, and building capacity for all of that. The second policy that we'll discuss this evening is a revision of the student involvement in decision-making. And finally, we will soon, September, I didn't realize we weren't meeting in August, but September, we will bring to you a school leadership team's revised policy as well. And I'll mention that a little later. So family engagement policy, the communication piece really focuses on a commitment to methods that are accessible and clear for families and students. Some of those things include maintaining an accessible and current website, the use of two-way communication as much as possible, and by that we mean there are sometimes messages that have to go out one-directional, such as we're going to have a snow day, right? We have to communicate that quickly and easily, and it's not a lot of time for dialogue. On the other hand, there's a lot of communication that can be back and forth and can be two-way, and we should strive for that when possible. Ensuring translations and interpretation are available for families in languages spoken by 5% or more of enrolled students. I think it's important to note here that outside of Spanish and English, any other languages we have in the district fall well under 1%. So it's a very tiny, tiny percentage. And of course, we work with families to support it, but the fact that we ensure translations and interpretations for populations of 5% or more. And utilize multiple methods to reach families about events and resource opportunities. So the idea that, in this very busy world, I spent some time in marketing. You used to have to communicate with people 3 different times in 3 different ways. That was before the advent of the smartphone, and that's now 7 times. That's just a reality that we can't be upset when families don't join us if we haven't put the time in to reach them. Under family partnerships, schools can foster family partnerships by extending proactive invitations to build necessary relationships and to strive for regular touch points with those families. We want to create and encourage opportunities for families and educators to share information. We want to welcome parents and student advocacy. And we want to have schools collaboratively plan with parents and students and staff the opportunities to build community and to welcome their new families, and to do that together. It's a matter of doing something with rather than for. And many of our schools, I have to make note, do many of these things. This policy isn't to correct bad behavior. It's to ensure that all schools have a baseline for the type of high-quality engagement, and that we offer the type of capacity building that schools may need to get there. So, shared decision-making, what does this look like at the district level? It means fostering and maintaining opportunities for parent, student, educator, and school leader input and feedback. So hosting the community summits that I mentioned earlier, facilitating stakeholder councils, such as the Family Engagement Partnership Council that is putting forward this proposal, as well as the good work of the President's Council, which is basically our citywide PTSO, maintaining an entity to provide capacity building for families and schools. Fundamentally, that's the Family Resource Center, and establishing and implementing an annual school climate survey for parents and students. And at the school level, we're really saying that schools need to maintain a shared school leadership team, and that's part of the work that's coming to you in September that really outlines how parents can play a role in that shared leadership. Developing and maintaining a parent partnership and networking council. That might be the PTO, it could be an advisory board, it could be a parent council that's staffed with someone on the school team. The collaborative building and revising of the homeschool compact. So that is a Title I requirement, and our schools have really gotten great at doing it, but we need to make sure that they know that it's a required piece of work. It's not just good to do, which it is good to do, it's a requirement. And then maintaining student government opportunities at the high school, and preferably also at the middle and even the elementary if so inclined. Fostering roles families play that best support student success. This is one that eludes many of our schools because this is in the research, and a lot of people haven't had the time or capacity to actually learn and understand the research. But fundamentally, there are 5 roles, research tells us, that families play that best support student success. And it's not necessarily attending events, although we love when they do. It's monitoring children's performance. It's guiding children's education. It's communicating high expectations, supporting learning at home, and indeed advocating for their children. And our school and the district need to be intentional in including these learning and empowerment opportunities in all their engagement efforts. So it's totally great to hold a big old event. Just make sure that we're focused on one or more of these areas when we do, right? So we can accomplish more than one thing. But of course, we need to build capacity to ensure that our schools are ready to take on this effort and to be successful. So we want to build capacity to provide guidance to schools, offer ongoing PD and coaching to school leaders and staff, provide training and guidance for student leaders. We don't want to give them a token role. We need to give them the type of information they need to be successful student leaders, and then provide schools the tools they need to implement their own capacity building and empowerment training programs for parents and guardians. Finally, or not finally, there's 2 more, student voice. Students thrive when they feel that they're in relationship with their educators, and when they're able to contribute to environmental and academic opportunities that define their own experiences. To that end, we're proposing significant revisions to the student involvement in decision-making policy. So those, let me back it up. In this policy, as it is now, the policy basically calls for continuation of a student, to have a student seat on the district's governing body, and requires schools to host student governments. But in this new policy, we include those 2 opportunities, but we also ensure that there's opportunities for voice and choice at the classroom level for all grades, real consideration for a move to student-led conferences, students' ability to request time to meet with their teachers, and finally, new as a superintendent's student cabinet, which is a really wonderful opportunity to expand student voice at the district level. So the concept would be for students in all of our schools and programs to be represented, grades 9 through 12, which are basically 7 different schools or programs, who would meet regularly with the superintendent to help problem solve, offer their perspectives, and then also inform their peers on district matters. So again, talking about that two-way communication. This is not just about receiving information, but also about giving information. So those, at this point, I think before I move into the attendance policy, this is a good time to probably pause and take your questions. All right.
Mine's more specific.
I think this one is yours.
That's Julia's.
Oh,
She's not coming.
she's not here.
I guess I was really excited to see that there was going to be an ELL council set up, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to hear how that's going as part of this whole effort for family
So I
engagement.
think we probably need to bring Kinnan Foley in at some point, who is managing all of the look bill pieces. That also does include an LPAC similar to the SPED PAC. And I do know that they held some informational meetings this year and are planning a formal kickoff in the fall, but maybe we can invite her to come and speak to how that's going.
At some other time?
Huh?
At some other time.
Yeah, she's not here tonight,
Okay.
so I guess so. Sorry.
One thing I would just love to hear a little bit more about, I think this is great and this is awesome work. And my kudos to the parents and the teachers and the staff who've been involved in this, because I know it's been a very intensive process and there's been a lot of really thoughtful discussion. So the one outstanding question I have is kind of what's the mechanism of accountability for schools around this? So given that we recognize how important family engagement is to academic progress, like how are people going to be held accountable to following this policy?
I think there's actually a couple of ways, and it's a good question. One is the fact that educators in their standards have a family engagement standard that they're held accountable to. So this proposed policy is actually going to help them be successful in meeting that standard, but it is a piece of their evaluation that should take place. The second is the annual climate survey, which is something that our district has done periodically, but is actual an annual mandate, so we're going to have to go out to bid and find a vendor for all of that. But the reality that's going to give us annual feedback on how schools are doing this work. And then finally, the family engagement team is divided, each owns a group of schools, and they go in and do some coaching and do some work with them, and they accumulate evidence every year of the work they're doing. So we should be able to look back and see change in their evidence. You know, right now it's some of it's amazing, but ultimately it's compliance driven, and we should be able to see change where a lot of that leads to more of the high quality indicators that I shared.
I would say that I would love for this board to be able to hear a report from the family engagement team and the Family Resource Center, you know, especially maybe after that survey's been implemented, or at whatever point it makes the most sense in terms of, you know, you guys having the information to report back on, but it would be great for us to hear how things are going.
We'd be happy to do that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I do just one more time want to thank all the 20 folks, 20 plus 150, who worked very hard on this all year. This is history making. When we share this with our technical coaches, there's not another district that we know of who is collaboratively building policy. And so we hope we're setting precedent in a good way. So I do want to thank all of them. All right. We can move on to attendance policy. Speaking of collaborative efforts. So the attendance policy work group. We're bringing forward tonight's 3 updated attendance policies for your consideration. And I do so again on behalf of a collaborative work group. And this work group included 3 LAE board members, 2 elementary principals, a middle school principal, high school principal, our district attendance officer, our director of community, family, student engagement, the assessment and accountability supervisor, myself, parents, and also an additional meeting that involved all of the high school principals. So once again, that was a very collaborative effort. And I would ask that if these folks are in the room this evening, that you also stand to be recognized, if you don't mind. All right, a few of them are here this evening.
Yeah, apologies. We missed the opportunity to clap the first time, too, for the other groups. Okay.
And the rest are teeing up for the Bruins game, apparently. So the work group process, again, thinking about how do we do this work collaboratively. It takes longer to do collaborative policy making or any type of collaborative planning, but the efforts end up being so much better. And in this case, we held 5 meetings from April to June on this, but we also held 3 alternative opportunities. So where people are often used to meeting in a workforce at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's not when parents can meet. So we held alternative evening meetings as much as possible to make sure that everyone had opportunities to meet and discuss. We held a focus group with all of the high school campus school leaders. We did everything in a Google shared drive so that people could comment and review and comment again. We sent this and actually all the family engagement policies for legal review. And then finally, we are here seeking your approval on these policies. So why do we need revised policy? Bearing in mind that the last set of attendance policies were created between 1995 and 2008, we could probably leave it at that, but there's actually a few good reasons. Our attendance-related policies are not accurate, and they reflect processes, unfortunately, that just actually no longer exist, systems that have changed, and actually a different mindset. So, for example, our kindergarten attendance policy said that full-day kindergarten is a privilege and you'll be removed and put into a half-day kindergarten. Well, we don't have half-day kindergarten anymore. So it became hard to use our policies to support work around attendance. So we needed to refresh them. So to that end, we are working hard on efforts to reduce absenteeism, and we need this messaging and the policy to support that. And we're working really hard to improve communication with families and updating our policies so that they have clear language to articulate our goals and our shared responsibilities is critical to this work. So we're presenting 3 proposals, a pre-K to 8 attendance policy, a pre-K to 8 record-keeping policy, and a high school attendance policy in which the record-keeping is embedded. You've received these documents in advance, so similar to family engagement policy, I will go over the highlights and changes, and then we can take your specific questions. So if we look at what's new, under record-keeping, we take attendance for 3 reasons. We need to know who's in the building for safety reasons. We need to know who's missing out on learning. And if a student is missing out on learning, are they accounted for outside of the school? Goes back to that safety. Are they safe? Do their parents know that they're out of school? And should we be concerned? And the other thing is changes in policy improve our ability to answer those questions, as well as the changes reflect the use of the student information system, often known as PowerSchool, which is our book of record, and a commitment to attendance taking in homeroom and in all classes. and the use of new coding that also expands to include constructively present. We had heard from some families who were confused about their child being able to go out on a shadow day or to tour a college and being marked as absent, when really those are learning opportunities, and those are school-sanctioned opportunities, and so the use of constructively present, which admittedly is not in the policy because it's procedure, but the policy allows us to add this procedure. So what's new under parent notification? Regarding parent notifications, we've really beefed up efforts for communications with families. For example, the new policy commits to a call made within the first hour of school. Previously, that bar was set by 10:30 a.m. With school starting as early as 7:30, that means, children could have gone unaccounted for up to 3 hours. So that commitment that this work can and should get done within the first hour of school. Increased efforts for personal communications with families. So students who are out of school 5 days receive a call from either the nurse, if it's medically related, or another staff member for non-medical reasons, to inquire about their child's health and safety and to discuss concerns and solutions to returning the student to school. And schools expand on their communications with families about the use of the SIS or PowerSchool parent portal to access ongoing attendance and also academic information. And this will require schools who have not yet taken advantage of the parent portal tool to launch this feature this school year. So there's a little work to do to make this part a reality. Goals and consequences. Previously, policy had pre-K to 8 and high school in conflict. With 95% attendance, which is no more than 9 absences in a full school year, as the type of attendance we want to see in pre-K to 8, but in the high school, the same percentage was used as the threshold for possible retention, so they were in conflict with each other. This new policy stresses the importance of school attendance, but places consequences in line with the state's definition of chronic absenteeism, which is set at 90% of enrolled days. Also called out in detail are the consequences, so that goals, actions, and consequences are transparent. To that end, we've introduced new language and did away with terminology of excused and unexcused absence. And this is going to take a little getting used to, but makes a lot of sense, and here's why. The change allows us to move away from an ongoing debate about what is excused and what does it mean to be excused, with many families believing that an excused absence is no longer an absence, which takes us to the reality that all absences, in fact, represent lost learning. Make-up work does not have the impact that being in the classroom has, where students learn through their interactions. That said, unavoidable absences with parent notification, now defined as level 1, do have opportunities for making up classwork, where truancies, which would really fall under level 2, for example, would not have that. And that pretty much is the same definition of excused and unexcused, but it takes the debate away and the confusion away from families who were surprised to see an absence marked on a report card when they thought it was excused. And it is excused. It means that it's an acceptable reason to be out of school, but it's still an absence. There we go. So what's new? Not on track, speaking of terminology. There's a need for a separate policy for high school because of credit-bearing classes and the way these credits impact graduation. Absences impact whether a student is on or off track for credit for a course or courses, which has implications, of course, for graduating on time. With the new nomenclature, 4 absences in a quarter will appear as an N on a quarterly report card. And again, this is for high school, signifying that a student is not on track for credit. This is a warning for students and parents to monitor their attendance. It is not a failure. It's a warning. A second N at the end of a semester course, signifying 8 total absences, would in fact cause a student to actually lose credit for the course. So the first N says, big warning, you are way off track. The second N says, you in fact never got back on track. For year-long classes, that threshold is 16 absences. And of course, students who start school at different times in the year, all of that is prorated on the days that they're present, or enrolled rather. However, it's important to note that there are opportunities for students along the way to convert their N to a letter grade. So this is not punitive. There are ways to convert N to a letter grade if he or she so chooses, through options such as acceleration academies or Saturday school, extended day programs, or similar based on what their school may be offering. Now, I do need to note that this applies to all of our high schools and programs and academies, with the exception of the High School Learning Center. The High School Learning Center has a unique structure that blends seat time with online learning. So it is crafting its own collaborative proposal for consideration, and we'll bring that in the fall to you. Oh, sorry. So because we want students in school, we've also changed consequences for tardiness at the high school. Formerly at the high school at the high school level, a tardy that was longer than 15 minutes equaled an absence, and 3 tardies also equaled an absence. We're not going to do that anymore. This discouraged students from trying to get to school. You can just hear the voices, right? I'm already going to be marked absent. I might as well not show up. It also encouraged students to be up to 15 minutes late to their class. I don't have a consequence for the first 14 minutes. I can make it to Wendy's and back. It'll be just fine, right? So we want our kids to be in school. So instead, now, if a student arrives after the bell, excluding excused reasons, they're tardy, period. And 3 tardies is no longer an absence, but rather requires action by the school and the student, and potentially to include their families, right? So a parent conference, involvement in an extended day program, a way to get back on track that is much more planful and mindful and supportive rather than punitive. What we don't want is for the punishment for being tardy or absent to be more absences. So lastly, we also want to inform families more along the way. And in the policy, there's parent notification to include warning letters and phone calls following the 3rd absence in a class. So we're making sure that people don't slip into that 4th or 8th or 16th without involvement from their family. And that is where we wrap it up, and I'm happy to take your questions.
I'm impressed with the rigor of the policy document. The PowerPoint was less threatening.
Intentionally so.
That was my experience. I'm just telling you how I felt today, reading the policy and then watching what you just did.
It's got to be legally right?
We're going to bring the police into it. but
I
we
was
decided
like,
not to
what
do
is
that.
going on here? So I have a couple of concerns about the policy. I guess my biggest concern that it feels like when you read the details, clearly you don't have to worry about the details if your kid shows up to school. That you don't have to worry about this. This policy would very seldom impact you if your kid is going to be in school all the time. But if you have a situation where your kid has missed school and you have to involve yourself in this policy, it feels like there's a lot going on here. The different levels, the types of absences, the levels of communications, different, it just feels like there's a lot going on, especially if you have maybe a kid in the high school and a kid in 9 through 12. And I guess that I would say, as long as the way that you communicate this complexity to parents is as simple as that PowerPoint, but I'm gonna tell you, there was a lot of stuff that was in this policy that's not on the PowerPoint. And so, when I talked to the superintendent about it, it's like, if we can boil it down to a one-pager in a way that is very simple to not only people who only have 20 minutes to give it because they have a busy day and 3 kids at home, but also to folks who may not have the same, capacity to consume this data, to consume this information. So the complexity of it scares me and concerns me. The second one is, the idea of new language, because it's hard enough to change culture, but then to change culture at the same time you're changing what you call things creates a problem. Do you know whether or not they currently have ends for attendance on the?
They use a very similar thing, but it's WF, which means withdrawal/fail, and that's not what that is, right? The N is just, is a lot more relatable.
Did you get my whole question? Because I didn't feel like I finished my whole question.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm not being finished. I just want to make sure you're answering the right question. Do you know if they use N right now to track attendance?
They use WF in lieu of
Okay.
N. So
Yeah, yeah.
N is a replacement of WF, and WF meant withdrawal failure, which is a lot more, it's actually just incorrect.
Yeah.
It's not correct. So we did some research around what other communities use and found the N to stand for not on track for credit to be a lot clearer. And again, I apologize for cutting you off.
No, I just, you probably expected that question. I just want to make sure, because I didn't know that you would do, to track the attendance during the years that can we get the volume turned down on my mic?
I think one of the
They would use
things
F
that's
to
important
track
to note is
attendance?
that, yes, yeah. So one of the things that's important to note is that
One,
the presentation
Thank you.
is simple and easier to digest because it only calls out the changes. The former high school policy is just as thick and as dense, but so it includes all the things that still stand. The presentation talks about what's different, but I do really like and appreciate your idea of coming up with a one-pager that is much more family-friendly, because this is a lot of legalese, and which is required in policy, but maybe not required in communications with families.
Yeah, and you may never need to know. Somebody else is on. You may never need to know the details of some of that policy if you're, but if you do and you're trying to like legalese it, it's gonna throw you off. And then I guess I would suggest that the language that you use and eventually adopt is one that's is easily translated into different languages, because some of these things don't have any real meaning in other languages. And I guess the last one is my biggest concern. I should say about my biggest concern. It concerns me a ton about how we count this stuff, the data collection around it. Because the moment you move the definition of what things are and you start counting it differently, you can't, when you compare it to former years, you can't stop people from saying, hey, it went up, hey, it went down. And are they cooking the books? And so I would just keep that in mind as you figure out how you're doing this, to best define, and maybe even before the results of a full year of this comes out, you say our expectations are that we will have more documented absences or fewer documented tardies or more documented dropouts, which is the one that really got my eye here. And I don't know if you're actually changing the definition of the dropout.
No, that's exactly the same as before. That's just outlining the reminder. That's actually an internal reminder in many ways to schools about when it is appropriate and when it's not appropriate to unenroll a student based on their absenteeism. And basically that's if they're a no-show. But if they're started school with us, it's on us to go out and find them.
If the district has documented unsuccessful efforts to locate the student, on the 11th day, the high school student shall be recorded as a dropout. Mm-hmm. That's the current policy?
Yes. After 10 days.
So there should be no issue with that, because that's not changing.
Exactly.
So though, I just would be concerned if you guys just keep an eye on that.
Sure.
Because people are dying to tell the real truth. And it could just be a data change, and as long as you keep track of it,
That's fair.
I think it'll be easy. But I was also impressed with the complexity. I just think it feels like when there are rules and everybody can understand them, that's where I get scared. I'm not sure everybody can get to understand them. And the more simple and basic you can make the complexity, I know it's an oxymoron, how simple you can make something complex, but that's the challenge before us, because the parents are the ones that have to consume this and make sure that they live by those rules. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
It's not a question, I just actually want to respond to the mayor's remarks to just say that I know that we don't have the old policy in front of us here, but this policy is no more complex than the old one, and in fact, in some cases, we eliminated language that was confusing and parts that were redundant, so it's actually probably slightly less complex than the previous policy was. And then we did have a number of pretty nuanced discussions that I think very productively revolved around the fact that we have to create a policy so that we have a standard that people can respond to. But part of what we wanted to embed in the policy is that it's not just about like a simple transactional, like a transactional moment around attendance, that we did want, like the new pieces, I think as Denise mentioned, like speak to this idea of if a student is absent, what we really want to do is call out a process around that for the family and school to be communicating with each other and make sure that there is communication happening. And that's an opportunity, like, because what we want to do is, especially in the cases where an absence might be happening because there's difficulty or challenges going on in the home, the school needs to be more connected and to understand what's happening so that possibly they can help mitigate or address that. So that was really, I think, where we put a lot of our effort into making changes. But I do want to say, I think you have a really excellent point about creating like almost a cheat sheet about this, because I think it is really important that, you know, it's all well and good for this to be the best and most beautifully written, nuanced policy in the world, but if parents don't understand it and it's not communicated clearly, then it's not going to be as helpful. So maybe we can work on that. I think, you know, that would be
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. I love it.
Okay, cool.
Sure. Denise, thank you very, very much. And I agree with Jess and her points. I just have a question around the parent portal. Mm-hmm. About how many schools are currently using their parent portal? Do you know offhand?
I do not want to make up the number. So I believe that a lot of our middle and high schools tend to be using it more than our younger ones. But, you know, we've had conversations at leadership team, and superintendent is very committed to making sure that all of our schools, they all have access. So it's a matter of converting people's mindset that that's the book of record. That's where the information goes and is shared with families.
Like, as we roll out all different things throughout the district, the rollout of the attendance policy needs to happen at the individual schools with a lot of, you know, communication between the parents and the staff. I think the parent portal should be part of that training.
For sure.
And I think once the parents get accustomed to using that parent portal, I think the policy in itself will become more clear. And I do agree with the mayor, we do need a one-pager just for, you know, clarity. Mm-hmm. But I want to thank you and your team.
Thank you.
This is outstanding work.
Thank you. It was really collaborative, and I appreciate the board's participation.
Thank you.
Thoughts?
So the parent portal, is that going to be optional for schools, or is that going to be mandatory for schools?
Superintendent?
Yeah, we're working with school leaders and teachers and staff to provide them additional training so that they can support families in using them and vice versa, so that it becomes a two-way communication tool. So we're not there yet, and we're strongly encouraging schools in the next year to get better participation on using the portal.
at some point, because of the training, I can see why you may want, but at some point, I think it's gotta, if it's gonna be the record of attendance across the district, I think you gotta make it binary. Either you say, yeah, you have to use it, or no. And I know that the leadership teams wanna have a little flexibility, but this seems like one of those things that you gotta be hard and fast about. And I would support it once we figure out what the policy is eventually gonna look, that the place that we count, this is one of the places that what you don't want is that people have spreadsheets all across the district that look differently. That causes chaos. Plus, if this cool portal helps you communicate with parents easier by email or by text message, then there's no reason to be off program on it. So I'll probably, not probably 6 months or 8 months from now, I'll probably ask the question again, just so that we can get some alignment on it.
Any final comments or questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
You.
Okay, we're moving on now to the superintendent mid-year review. And
Mr. Chair, just before we do that, I just want to make sure.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I also want to make sure that we know that Kim Berry, the new president of the Teachers Union, is with us in the back. Just want to say hello and acknowledge her. Thank you for coming out, Kim.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're moving on to the superintendent mid-year review. This is an update, but just to remind the board, as a board this year, we adopted a 9-month evaluation cycle for the superintendent. It started off with a self-assessment that the superintendent did, and then a superintendent presenting her plan to us, which we voted on and accepted. The work has been going on to implement the plan, and we're at the stage now where it's a mid-cycle goals review, which is what we're doing today. And as a reminder, this current year, because it's a 9-month evaluation cycle, it will conclude in September, which means that we'll send out more detailed instructions about how we'll get to that final phase, but it will include, as we discussed, board members providing their evaluations, and then the board chair compiling that into the final report that gets presented to us in September. So just a little context in terms of what we're hearing today.
Yeah, great. I think you may have copies if you want to follow along in your binders. This is labeled as the self-evaluation, but I'm going to walk you.
We don't have them. That's fine.
I think you have them from the first time that they were approved in their binders, and so those are existing, and I'm just going to update and give a review. So it'll look the January meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Take a look to see if it's in there. I'll walk you through the 3 goals. In a moment, I'll give you. See where it says superintendent goals, it's on there. Yeah, the February 25th, it's tabbed February 25th, 2019. If you find that agenda, it may be in there somewhere in your binders, depending. All right, I'll walk you through it. So the first goal is the professional practice goal. There's 3 goals. There's a professional practice goal, there's a district improvement goal, and then there's a student learning goal. As a reminder, the professional practice goal reads as follows: to participate in cohort 9 of new superintendent induction program, successfully complete the first year of the induction program, and expand leadership skills in the areas of strategic development, systems thinking, and instructional leadership. So the progress to date is that I have attended the 8-day-long sessions and completed all assignments. I've consulted with my assigned coach on a monthly basis. That actually continues to happen throughout my 2nd and 3rd year. And in addition, I've attended the Urban Superintendent Networks. As if you know, we are one of the urban districts in the state. The second goal is the district improvement goal. This one reads, execute effective entry and direction setting. By early spring, the district will have a broad agreement from stakeholder groups about the district's most critical challenges, strategies to address them, and measures of progress. So I have progress to date for those. I as you all know, completed my 100-day listening tour. I presented those findings to include strengths and emerging themes, and collaborated and sought feedback from the different stakeholders, groups on process. Part of that is also to foster effective district governance model and positive and transparent board superintendent relations. Progress is that I participate in weekly or as needed meetings with our board chair to build a relationship and maintain transparent communication. I consult with him and co-construct our board agendas. Things that are in progress for that goal is that I'm still working on establishing communication systems, both written, phone calls, meetings, text messages, with other board members. I have some that feel pretty systematic right now, and some are still quite not established, so I'm still working on what works best for each board member. Then the next one is maintaining momentum during the leadership transition to keep the district moving forward during the year's transition by working with principals, central office leaders to ensure that there's meaningful progress that is made on district goals. So the progress to date is, I've conducted, and I reported some of this in my entry plan, I've conducted weekly visits to our high school and an average of 5 school visits to each of our schools and classroom observations. I meet weekly with central office leadership team and as needed, and monthly one-to-ones. And I've hired key district leadership positions to include our chief financial officers, our assistant superintendent, and 4 new principals. The last goal was student learning, and this one is related to the policy we just discussed, which is to reduce chronic absenteeism by engaging community, parents, students, and school leaders in attendance data and improvement strategies. I'll highlight the progress to date, and then I'll share things that are still in progress and show you an update attendance report. So the progress to date is I shared the attendance data with families, school leaders, and community. We've identified root causes impacting attendance. We've created public awareness campaigns with pediatricians, dentists, healthcare specialists about the impact of medical appointments during the school day. And of course, we've reviewed our attendance policy. Things that are still in progress, we still conduct year-round attendance matters workshops for school leaders and families. And then throughout the summer, we're going to continue to monitor and review our strategies. And lastly, identifying key improvement strategies with school leaders to reduce absenteeism between now and the rest of the school and the summer. So I'll share with you just a quick update on what our attendance looks like. I shared this with our President's Council, which includes families, students, teachers, and school leaders. I'll give you a moment to look at that. And of note, if you can see on the column that has the greens, reds, and yellow, and then I'll share the highlights of that. So let me share a bit of what's happening here. You'll see that on the left-hand side column, we have grades K to 8. When we talked about this back in December, our total chronic absenteeism was at 18.9. If you scroll to the right, you will see that we are just right under that, and that was as of May. When we look at the K to 4, you see that we are at the same levels between 21% and we are at 21%. And then right under that, it's grades 5 to 8. We left off at 15%, just a little bit over, and we've reduced that just slightly. So the greens is we're making progress, or we're keeping it pretty steady. Now we'll look at our high schools, grades 9 to 12. You see that we're still struggling. We left off in December at 33%, and in May, we're at 38%. What you notice is that our first and second, kindergarten students and first graders, followed by 9th, 10th, 11th, and then our seniors continue to have the most challenges. And then grades 2 through 8, we've made progress. I share this information with our school leaders. In turn, they've shared it with their staff. We have many theories as to what continues to happen. We have a lot of input from our students specifically and from our families. But I just wanted to share this is where you are. I will be bringing back more up-to-date data when I see you all for the August and of course in September to see where we are, and with new ideas and strategies for the 1920 school year. I'm happy to take questions on this update and specifically to the chart that I've presented just now.
Jess?
So, what are people saying?
Yes. You know, our students are my favorite with respect to they're quite surprised and shocked. They're like, what? That's my own data, because we happen to have quite a bit of high schoolers and middle schoolers in this group that give us ideas about why they're not showing up. Some kids are really honest. I'm like, you know what? It's not that interesting. Some kids are like, my mom left me and I slept all day. I was tired because I was up all day. Parents continue to be quite surprised and a bit disappointed that when they do entrust their students to show up to school, especially our high schoolers, that they're sleeping because they've been up all night. Our teachers continue to be really tenacious about making phone calls, showing up to homes, thinking about incentive programs that get kids there so they continue to share what's working for you. They've become quite good at looking at their school calendars and determining when they expect that kids won't show up, followed a long break, followed a long weekend, followed something that's happening that they know might be potentially a day or a week that we will have low attendance, and they create incentives around that. The other thing that we talked about quite a bit was this public awareness campaign for healthcare providers, where students and families are on board with, you go to your appointment and you come back, otherwise that counts as an attendance, as you're not counted present. So those were the conversations that we had most recently in May with that group.
Pat?
The data you're showing us, Superintendent, clearly warrants a new attendance policy. But what I noticed that's significant is the kindergarten at 31%. And I know it's not mandated until a child is 6, but if we can get to the kindergarten parents, that's where the bad habits begin. And you see it's carried over into grade 1. And then it finally decreases in grade 2. So that's huge there. I think a lot of work needs to be done in the kindergarten.
Agreed. We also learned from families who have young students that they're challenged by weather conditions, specifically if they have to walk and they have a younger child. So an example of that is very cold, and they have a toddler, an infant that they have to walk with and then walk their 5-year-old or 6-year-old. They opt not to, and they leave the older student at home. So if one of the kids is sick, that has a consequence for the entire family. So they talked a lot about walking pools, where I'm part of your neighborhood, so I'll take your student because your baby is sick, or I'll watch the other child, something that makes sense that now I'm walking with you. But that we need to start creating back to the family and community policy, where families get to know each other intimately, and I can trust you with my 5-year-old or my 6-year-old. And I said, okay, Jess, you can take her today because my baby is sick and I don't want to walk with my sick baby to bring my 5-year-old or my 6-year-old to school today. So they had really good ideas around that as well. But that's what we learned was the biggest deterrent to our kindergartners and first graders to show up when they have to walk.
I'm sorry to be repetitive, but I do think that point is super important. Like, this is why family engagement is important. Yeah. And it's not just about lecturing to families about reading with your kid at home or something. It's about getting parents to know each other so that we have a network and a community where parents can help each other out. that can't be stressed enough.
Yeah, we agree. Our families are on board with that, our school leaders and teachers as well. We have a few principals that spend quite a bit of time asking families to come in to share, tell us more about why it's so hard to bring your student. And they were very honest. There were many, many reasons, and I'm just sharing the one about when kids get sick at this age group.
Just do you have a sense, I mean, when I look obviously at there's both the early childhood, grades and then the high school, which is probably consistent with trends across the state, but I'm just wondering to the earlier presentation with the current policy of, 15 minutes tardy equals an absence, like to what degree do you think adjusting the policy will have an impact on even, we're not going to change this year's rates, but what do you think the impact might be?
It's a great question. I don't know what the correlation will be yet, but we will be happy to keep track and see what does that mean with respect to policy change. But it's a great question.
Because again, I think presumably if we're marking kids absent being late 15 minutes, you know what I mean? I'm trying to know how many of these chronically absent are actually kids that were late 20 minutes or 16 minutes multiple times, so. All right, other questions around the data or just the superintendent's update on her goals?
I just wanted to make one more comment. On the high school one, I also think this is where student voice is going to be really important, and maybe utilizing some kind of design team format where you're getting students and I would recruit from the students who are chronically absent, not from the ones who are there every day, to come together in a design process around some of the incentives that you describe, or something that, so we can get, I know it's a hard age, and I'll speak as someone who cut high school a lot when I was in it. I just think that it would be really interesting. I know as a high school student, I was never asked, why are you here or why are you not here? And so I think that would be a good thing to do too.
And just as a suggestion towards that end around the high school, maybe we can have a discussion with the businesses around there to do an early, like a 10% off if you come get your coffee early. If you're a student, you show your ID and you come to get your coffee or whatever it is you're getting there, because they're going to Taco Bell, they're going to all those businesses that are on the highway right there. But if they go early enough, they can get whatever they're getting and get out of there so they can be back to the school on time. It's just, those people are getting the business anyway, that actually might even grow the business. But getting our kids out of their businesses in time before the bell rings is our goal. And if we can help them do that by getting them to initiate some percentage off, would be good. And I'd be willing to help you talk to those people.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I do want to point out, I know the irony of just saying we need student voice, and I recognize that I think there was a student with her hand up. We are at the point of the agenda. I mean, we have business items. We already had public comment, but I would invite, if you want to check in after, with myself or members of the board, we definitely want to hear what you have to say. Okay, so the third item does call for a vote, and this is for the superintendent to join the CREST board. I'll read a little bit about what is the CREST board, and then let the superintendent say anything if she'd like. So the CREST, it stands for Collaborative for Regional Education Services and Training, and it's the regional collaborative for the Merrimack Valley. And the
Toothpaste company.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no. Actually, I know that'd be. And with the collaborative, since 2013, legally we've been pretty delineated in terms of who serves on that board. And basically what happens is sending districts, which Lawrence sends students to this collaborative, we currently have 18 in terms of placement, and these are out-of-district placements to support students. The district has to have the superintendent serve on the board of directors or an appointee of the school committee. And so for this past year, we had special dispensation with the LAE starting to have the assistant superintendent serve in the capacity, but now for the next school year, we would need to vote to have the superintendent be a member of that board. Superintendent, is there anything you want to add to that?
That covers it.
So moved as presented?
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, the next item is update on education management organization. So, just as a reminder, so we have, as the board, and actually the superintendent and the district have approved operational plans for our schools, but we have a few organizations that are managing schools on our behalf, and we have MOUs and contracts with those organizations. Those ones that we have expire at the end of June. My understanding from the district, and please, superintendent will weigh in, is that there are multiple conversations happening. They're moving, towards just agreement in terms of the MOU. But we're running up against the summer. There's a June 30th timeline currently for those contracts. So what we're going to bring to you tonight is a request for a vote to extend the current MOUs until the 15th of August to give the superintendent and her team the ability to continue working with the partners to arrive at a new updated MOU for the next school year. So in a second, we have actually some documents that we'll pass out one by one. There will be 4 that I'd be asking the board to vote on tonight. And I should say that these are all extensions of the current MOU and contract, and that we would then pass on to the city, and they would, using their normal business practices, seek to extend until the 15th of August. Okay, great. Before we do that, Superintendent, do you want to add any words here on just where we're at with these?
Sure. I would just add that with all of our EMOs, we're in good standing and have had conversations throughout this year about our partnership, and feel really positive about moving forward with all of the work with them. I just wanted to highlight that examples of what we've been talking about with one of our EMOs is things like professional development opportunities and where those are being held. So they're minor details. I think in the next couple of weeks and throughout the summer, we're going to come to some agreements that make sense for us both.
Great. And so you'll have 4 in front of you, and we can take them one by one. If you want to just take a second to read the first one between Lawrence Family Development, Inc. and Lawrence Public Schools.
Mr. Chair, I would encourage us to take separate votes on each.
Yes. So one thing I should point out, too, in terms of the packet, the very first one that you're looking at, let me just give a quick overview, is for an extension amendment for Lawrence Family Development, Inc., as it relates to the RISE academic program. So this is as it relates specifically to the agreement that this year we have in place with Lawrence Family Development for really use of the facility portion primarily of the agreement. You will see a separate document, which is actually the third one in your packet, which we'll take up separately, but it's requesting an extension for the district to engage in further conversations around specifically operation of Lawrence Family Public Academy. So, Superintendent, do you want maybe a little more context on why we're separating these?
Yeah, that's right. So this EMO encompasses 2 of our programs, one which is our RISE. This is for youth risk, and they have their separate agreement to encompass housing us in a building accompanied by programming. And then the other program is our preschool. So that also is housed in a separate building and has curriculum and programming as well. They keep it separate because both are incredibly different programs and have a set of philosophy, curriculum, and programming that is very detailed and specific to the population. One is our preschoolers, and one is our high schoolers. And so that's why they're separate agreements.
Okay, so I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve or open debate on the extension amendment for between Lawrence Family Development, Inc. and the Lawrence Public Schools for services related to the SISU Center RISE Academy program.
So moved.
Is there a second
Second for discussion?
for discussion? Yep.
Am I mistaken in understanding that, I thought we were moving away from this relationship? And will that, maybe that information will come between now and the end of the term?
So right now, we are discussing programming aspects of RISE in particular. I think that's the one that you're referring to.
Correct.
Yeah. And so this week, for example, we're going to be meeting with both RISE staff and our staff to try to reconcile some programming challenges that we've had in the past. And so it looks very promising, and we think we will be extending the contract.
I think yeah. Great. That's all I have.
And just for clarification, this is extending through August 15th, which the board, I believe we're scheduled for an August 14th meeting, so we would come back to look at the final MOUs before they're actually approved. Any other discussion? Okay, there's a
So,
motion. Oh, go ahead.
The only thing I would be concerned about is if we're extending all of these through August 15th, but if there's any, if there's a possibility that the operator is not, I mean, isn't that cutting it extremely close if the operator is not going to be renewing an MOU
Yeah,
with us?
and
Or is it in all cases, it's very probable that there's going to be renewal? It's just
They
there's
will be
things that
renewed.
still need to be worked out.
I think they're working out details of the,
Okay.
yes.
Gotcha.
Yes, thank you for
Okay.
clarifying
Yeah, that's
that.
fine.
Yeah. Okay, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. We'll take them up in order that they were in the packet. So the second one relates to, and I moved my packet, so the Up Education Network, is that the next one in everyone's packet? Okay, so if you want to take a second, again, it's very similar, same date of August 15th. And I'll entertain a motion. You ready?
Motion to
Second.
approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. The third one relates to Family Development, Inc. And Lawrence Public Schools related to Lawrence Family Public Academy. Is there a motion to approve this extension?
A motion to approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And then the final one is between Lawrence Public Schools and Community Day Care of Lawrence, Inc. And I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Great.
I
Discussion
just
open.
have one question. Superintendent, how long have they been with us?
This is their fifth year.
The third?
Fifth year.
Fifth year? Are you looking at data as far as student achievement and how they have performed with our kids?
We have.
Okay, would that be available to us in
Absolutely.
August?
Yep, we can make
Okay.
that available to you.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Okay, and the final order of business is approval of the minutes from the last meeting, May 8th. And I'll entertain a motion as soon as folks are ready.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Nope. All right, motion passes. Before we adjourn, I will turn it over to the superintendent for final comment.
I just would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that Mary Lou Bergeron is retiring, and this is her last official board meeting attendance. And so if you would please join me in thanking her for her service and tireless commitment to our students, families, and to all this community. We're having a great celebration for her on Friday from 4 to 7 at the Boathouse, so please join us if you're free, and if you're not, thank you. Thank you all and thank you, Mary Lou. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And as always, just thank you to district staff, Joan, Anne Marie, others who I know have done tremendous work to help get this meeting together, so
Can I,
appreciate it.
along those lines, I end up printing out a lot of the stuff that I get on email, so can we make just a decision on whether or not the packet will be fully with us when we come here, or we expected to take it down from the internet? I think the superintendent's 6-month report was a vital thing to have gotten in hand before this conversation. I know there's a lot of balls to juggle, but this one thing is really important that I think we've been getting this stuff early. I just don't know if it's going to be in my packet or if I got to print it down, and especially if something gets projected, and a person who has to go before the city council and prepare for that, and sometimes it goes to the last minute. I know that I'm asking for something that's not very easy all the time, but especially if they're things of import. I'm not asking for, like a review of the showcase of the arts programming. I don't need that a week in advance. I could come and show up and consume that here. But I would really have liked to have the superintendent's report, because that's a thing that somebody's gonna ask us about. And I just wanna make sure, and it's easy enough just to look at the agenda that does get set in specific time ahead of time, and just making sure that we have data and stuff, in the packet for that. And I'd prefer for it to be in the packet than for me to print it, because sometimes I print stuff that I don't need, and that's a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I'd be curious too, like, because I would absolutely want to make sure moving forward that we have anything that we're meant to be reviewing ahead of time,
Yes.
so that it saves time during the meeting, so we can do our homework and then come ready to discuss. So I think that's something that we should absolutely commit to. And I think, there's a question as well that I think we just have to come to, and this is the very technical side of this, but like, again, do we want binders here waiting for us with everything ready? To the mayor's point, do we print them ahead of time? Should we have a sort of centralized place electronically where we know everything is, bylaws, just every and any presentation? There are models that we have done this. We use that at the state board. I'm sure other boards as well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at Joan as well, to potentially, because I know you've brought up some of these issues as well for us to discuss.
Mr. Chair, and I would just say to you the response, and I know that this is not going to be a very popular response. I think you have to do all of it, and I think you have to do it timely. There's people on this board that don't work full-time for the city or the school system, and there are, maybe not in central office, but across the district, lots of people that work for the district. And I think that to ask this to be done is not a tall order, given the breadth and depth and knowledge and experience of people that work in central office.
So,
Jess?
yeah, can I just say, who's going to be responsible for figuring this out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's us. I don't know if I've been kicking around, like, do we develop a subcommittee? Do we work with Joan, one of us? And I'm happy to sort of nominate myself to just work with with Joan to put together. I'm hearing from the board, like, we want
Yeah.
everything timely, in packets, and electronically. Like, again, let's make sure that we're communicating. I mean, I'd be happy to work with Joan to put something for your consideration.
Yeah, I think that that's a good idea. I mean, I think someone needs to just say,
Yeah.
this is what we're going to do,
Right.
based on what we've all said. And I would echo the mayor's comments, like, especially if I'm going to be asked to vote on something or discuss something here, I want it ahead of time so that I can read it and understand it. And, getting the presentations ahead of time would be lovely too. And also, and I just want to be told there's going to be printouts at the meeting, or I'm expected to print it out. Either one, but I don't want to print it out and bring it here and then also have the
Yeah.
printout. Yeah,
Right.
Apologize for that one that I missed, but it was attached when I did send everybody the notice
Yep.
of the meeting and the agenda. So
Yeah.
I take responsibility on missing that one item, but I have sent it to you.
yeah, and I guess I just want to know, are you also going to print everything out for us, or do you want us to print? Because I don't mind printing it. I just want to know ahead of time.
Good system, based on, the documents and binders, and I think it could be a little better, kind of system. So it's something we can really discuss.
Can we bring a proposal to the board at our next meeting? And I'd say for the next meeting, what I'm hearing, and I think what I want to commit to is, we're going to print everything for every board member, just so we have it here. We're going to send the agenda, but also any attachments that are up for discussion electronically when we send the agenda, because I think, again, that makes sense. And potentially, if we have the presentations, that would be great, but at minimum, any documents we'd be expecting the board to review ahead of time, vote on, respond to. So at a minimum, let's provide ways in multiple formats. We will print them, we will send them, and then we can discuss it further as a team, but I think let's err on that first.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the only two things that I would say is that I don't see this as a Joan thing. I see this as a district thing that you guys have to figure out, because I'm sure that if she had to wait for the presentation that was given tonight and she wasn't given that presentation, it looks like she didn't give it to us. So I want to be clear about what I'm talking about here. It's like, you guys have to go figure it out. This is really not algebra.
No, thank you. But Joan helps organize us, so I'll take your help in that. But yeah, duly noted. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Before,
Can I
before we move-
I have one question?
Sorry, I had a comment here from Pat first, and then
Yeah.
Jess.
I just want to say the change of venue tonight was very, very nice.
Yeah.
And I think this building lends itself to easy access for participants to come and be part of this meeting. So I don't know if you'd want it in the form of a motion, but I would like to move that we hold our LAE meetings in this building.
Didn't we talk about moving them from place to place so that we could be in
We did.
different
We talked about
buildings?
going
'Cause-
from school to school.
Yeah,
But that-
I would like to do that. Or is that too confusing?
That might be tough on the TV crew.
Oh,
But their central office is right here in this building, so it would be making it a little easier for them.
Mr. Chair, I think that was well spoken from the committeewoman from District E. It's a great, and as my school committee member,
This is District
F,
F.
I know, but as my school committee member, I appreciate that she's looking out for us on the south side. I think that to go back and forth, either do 2 here and then 2 at the high school, the old high school. You're never gonna make me change the name what I call the old high school, or here. I think switching it back and forth, either every other meeting, or 2 here, then 2 there, or 3 here and 3 there, just so that we do give a geographic variety.
yeah.
Right, I mean, putting together our calendar is something we have to do at the first meeting of the year. So, I mean, I would recommend that in putting that calendar together, and again, if we want to continue with the second Tuesday of every month, I think we have to revisit that, and we also have to revisit
Wednesday.
location. Is it Wednesday? Wednesday of every month? Thank you. I don't know what day it is. Yeah, right? Exactly. Right. Wednesdays are good for me. So I guess I would say, that will be an agenda item at our August meeting, because it's about the kickoff of the year, and we should take it up there.
Are we having an August meeting?
We are, and again, I believe it's the
So-
14th.
Okay, because
on the-
That was my question, because the mayor's agenda says our next regularly scheduled meeting is on September 12th. But mine says it's on September 11th. Okay,
11th is the right date.
so the 11th is the right date, but we're now also going to meet in August, on August 14th. Okay,
We have contracts approved.
all right, so August 14th. So is that going to be here or at the old high school?
Was there a reason
Yeah.
we moved here, right? Because, do you want to?
So we're currently under construction at the old high school.
okay.
And may not be ready to resume meetings over there in August, so that's to be determined.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, can we just say we'll meet here, just so we know?
let's do
August
that.
at least, and then we'll.
This is
we'll look at
not
the-
as,
oh,
this
it's
is not as
14th?
warm as the old high
Yeah.
school, too, so I would prefer to meet here in August and maybe even September.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.